Year 11 and families, thank you very much for joining us for another rendition of English in 30 for our revision session. We are still focusing on the structure question because this is one that was pointed out from the mock exams when we looked at question level analysis that was the weakest across the year group. And I have mentioned to Year 11 several times before that a huge percentage of students didn't answer this question. And we think it was because of the confusion of these bullet points here. So what we're going to do, hopefully you've all got your copy in front of you that was handed out in Mastery this morning. We're going to remind ourselves of the first thing that we're going to do when we turn over our paper to question 3. We're going to remind ourselves that it is the whole of the source that we should be referring to, which means that we ideally need to read the entire thing and, if possible, pick things out from the beginning of the extract, the centre of the extract, and, if possible, towards the end as well. They're not looking just for you to focus on the first few lines. They are hoping that you can move down to at least the part of the extract that is boxed off for you in question 2. We also need to have a look at whereabouts in the text this is from, because that will help hugely for you to figure out if it's the beginning of the novel, they're trying to hook you in to want to read on. If it's the centre of the novel, they're probably revealing more information. If, however, it's the end of the novel, you'll potentially find that they start to draw things to a close. And then, of course, we need to make sure that we are getting our writer's name, because it makes our writing much more sophisticated if we're referencing the writer by their surname. Remember, we always call them by their surname, not by their first name. It's a formal piece of writing, so we need to ensure that we are referencing by their surname. And then, of course, the question that never changes, remember Year 11, that's the beauty of this English language exam, that the questions always remain the same. So before you enter this exam, you already know that your question is going to be on the structure of the text and how it is interesting you as the reader. Those are the two things that we need to make sure that we are mentioning. Then we're issued with 3 bullet points. And again, these 3 bullet points do not change. These 3 bullet points will remain the same in the mock exam through to the summer exam. 2017. And the first bullet point, of course, is what your writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source. And this is where Year 11, we have this beauty that every single extract, there should be a character or a setting that is introduced. And that is what we need to be looking for. So we need to learn and remember that it is character or setting for that first bullet point. That's where families and people at home can help you revise, and they can say, what does that first bullet point actually ask you to focus on? And we're looking for character or setting and what is introduced where. In each of the AQA extracts, all the way back from 2017, character and the setting have always been to start, because it is used as a type of hook to give us either our protagonist, our antagonist. Remember, protagonist, good, antagonist, the bad character. And each of the texts that you are given will have some form of protagonist or antagonist. Please remember, Year 11, that your antagonist doesn't always have to be a human. The mock exam extract that we were looking at before, when it was the text about the hyenas from Life of Pi, the antagonist was actually the hyena. So it was in animal form. Other papers that you will have studied, so when we think back to the end of Year 10, we had a Steinbeck extract. That one, the antagonist was a scorpion. To think about whether or not this antagonist is human or is it something else. Then we'll think about the second bullet point. And AQA actually boxed this one off. Remember, this is boxed off for you in question 2. So AQA have already identified this for you. So if time is limited, if you're stuck for things to write, please remember that this section here is always the zooming in. And always adds extra detail for you. So details are revealed, whether that's details about a character, is it further details about the setting, is it how the setting's making the character feel, out, and you can't think of how to get started, always look after you've answered question 2, what has been boxed off. And that will cover how the source develops, because of course it will be further down in the extract. And then that's when we look at any other structural features that might interest you. So anything at all structurally that you find of interest as you read the extract. Remember, structural features, we can't comment on sentence forms. Please don't look for short sentences, because they don't get you any marks in this question. The structural features and interest that they're looking for is things such as tension and how that tension builds as you read the extract. It could be repetition. Repetition is a great one when looking at structure, because that repetition has been used for a purpose. The writer has chosen to repeat either that word or that phrase or that piece of punctuation to grip you as the reader. It might be the mood or the atmosphere that's created. Is it a happy, positive mood, or is it a negative, scary atmosphere that's been created? You can, of course, look, and we've got some posh terminology here, at foreshadowing. And remember, foreshadowing is just a fancy way of saying predicting the future. So anything at all that might hint that something bad's going to happen, or hint that something really positive's going to happen. So don't let these bullet points confuse us. When we next open our question 3 in lesson, because that's what's up next in our revision booklets for English language, it's question 3 revision. It's what we'll be sitting our next assessed piece on, because we're really wanting to see improvements after the revision that you've done in lessons. It's these bullet points that people followed, but they forgot that these are what AQA are actually asking and looking for. The next thing that you can potentially have your families help and support you with is your sentence starters. Remember, you know what the question's going to be, year 11. It's always going to be about how the writer has structured the text to interest you as the reader. So with our sentence starter, we're going to want to comment if it's beginning, middle, or end. Now, remember, one of the most common misconceptions and spelling errors that we see at the Manor Academy, that we see across all 9 schools in the 2 Counties Trust, and that we see up and down the country is the spelling of the word beginning. So we can edit that out, and you could write start at the start of the extract the writer uses. And remember, this part here will always change for the writer's name. So in this extract, once we've analysed, we will be saying Furnival. For the extract that we looked at the end of year 10 for your mock exam, you would have said Steinbeck. In your lessons this week, start and realise that we're analysing some of Stephen King's work. So replace writer for King. So it's always their surname. And then at least 2 pieces of evidence. If we can really push for it, we could go for 3. Because the more evidence, the stronger your answer is going to be. Another common misconception across the mock exams was that people weren't using quotations to support their response. They weren't giving any evidence from the text. To get in the bracket of 1 to 2 marks for this question, you've got to use quotations. Then, beautiful words that we use for every explanation, whether it's language or structure, whether it's language or literature, this suggests, because this is where you make an inference. And you start to show the examiner that you're understanding this character, or you're understanding this setting, or you understand why the writer has zoomed in on something at that moment. And then we have to say why it's interesting to the reader. But remember, year 11, we can't just say because it makes us want to read on. We've got to think about, why does it make us want to read on? What is it that's actually interesting about it? So now we're going to, and you will get, remember, on the front of your extract booklet in the real exam, a little blurb, a little that will probably give you the information that you need for introduction of character and setting. It will always be there. AQA and what this story is going to be about. So we know it was published in 2012. So we know that the chances are this is going to be a modern text. And it describes a girl Jessica. So even just from reading that blurb, we already know who our character is going to be. So if we were stuck for time, or if we were slightly unsure in the exam about what we were going to write, we can write that first paragraph. At the beginning, the writer uses marks. And straight away, you've got yourself marks. And this little girl, Jessica, is concerned over what she can hear in the corridor outside her bedroom at night. So again, from reading that little blurb, we've got an idea of the setting. We've got a character, we've got a person that we can follow, and we've got a place where that person is. And remember, we can say the same thing about setting over and over again. We're being transported to a brand new place, following a character that we've never ever seen before. So now we're going to have a little read of this extract. And if you and your families would like to identify or highlight or underline or pop a star next to any of the pieces of evidence that we could use for character, setting, zooming in, or any of those other structural features, tension in particular, have a go at highlighting or underlining as I read this to you. First, they are the ones that come at you out of the darkness and seize you by the throat. They are the ones that slither under the door of your bedroom. Stop it. Don't do that. Jessica rapped her knuckles against her forehead. Don't. You're too old to be frightened of nothing. Too grown up. 7 years and 8 months. Not like Georgie, her younger brother, who was tucked away by her parents in a tiny bedroom at the far end of the corridor, like something dirty. Still the noises came at her, voices soft and secretive, a whisper cut short, her mother's quick and urgent footsteps on the landing, other sounds that didn't belong, that crept like thieves in the shadows. Jessica didn't like the dark, and she could never understand how the air could become so solid at night, or why its weight was sometimes so heavy on her chest that she had to pummel her lungs to make them work. She drew her knees up to her chin and wrapped her arms around her shins, hugging her inset nightdress, the one with the blue ribbons, tight against her skin. Even under her bedspread, she was cold. Suddenly it came back again, the sound that had woken her, a whimpering that made the blonde hairs rise on the back of her neck. She threw off the quilt cover and leapt out of bed. Her heart was juddering against her bony ribs as she pushed her way through the darkness, parting it with her hands like a curtain until she reached her bedroom door. She gripped its brass knob and quickly turned it. Nothing happened. Her fingers tried again. Nothing. It was locked. Jessica's skin crawled the way it did when a spider dropped on her arm. Why would her father lock her in? Why would her mother agree? Fear, sharp and brittle, poked at her chest. She crouched on the floor and wiggled onto her side on the lino until her eyes were pressed by the ribbon of light between the door and the floor. But she could make out nothing except a blur of carpet on the other side. Again, the whimper fluttered across the landing, followed by a high-pitched, frightened squeal. Rage seized her and she leapt to her feet, pounding her fist on the door, shaking it on its hinges. "Georgie!" she screamed. Abruptly, the light on the landing flicked off. Silence, thick and oily, flooded the house. "Georgie!" Jessica shrieked. "Georgie!" She banged on the wooden panels of the door. "Let me out!" Nothing but silence. "Mummy?" Nothing but darkness. She held her breath, listening so hard her ears hurt. Suddenly she heard a distant click. It was the front door closing. Now, hopefully we recognise this extract because it is the same one that you used for your assessed piece last week when we were mastering answering the question 4. So we've used the same extract because AQA will ask you the same questions about structure, language, and the opinion and the list 4 things, and it will all be on the same extract. So now we're going to have a little look further and think about where is our introduction of character, where is our introduction of setting, what's actually being zoomed in on, where's the tension, is there any repetition that's been included? So first of all, we've got the setting and this idea of darkness and night noises outside of the door of your bedroom. So we've got our setting that has been introduced. Now remember, we can always say the same things about the setting, that we've been transported to a new place. We've never been there before. So we're interested, writer, to reveal more information. We want to find out about this place who is informing us about. And then we get our introduction of character as Jessica rapped her knuckles against her. So our character, much like in the blurb, got our character, we've got our setting, now we've got the evidence to prove it. And actually there's an interesting element about this character as she's introduced, because we know that she's a little girl. She tells us a little bit further down about how old she actually is. She tells us that she's 7 years and 8 months old. So we know that when it says little girl in the blurb, she really is a little girl. She's a child, locked in a bedroom, terrified. But what's interesting is the action that she does. Wrapped her knuckles against her forehead, because she's clearly very distressed about something. And for a 7 be locked in her bedroom and feel distressed, we're interested to find out more about this character. What is it that's causing her this upset and this anxiety? And that's what we need to read on for. Then the writer starts to zoom in, and it zooms in on these noises. Lots of sounds. So the zooming in section is on sound. And that sound actually builds up the tension. So this is where we can start and think about the second bullet point, because it's zooming in, but also the third bullet point, because we've got another structural feature that's interesting, because it's building up this tension. And as a reader, knowing that she's 7 years and 8 months old, so the reader worries for this child. So, of course, we now need to know, we've got to read on to find out if this child is safe. It opens up this question. Is this child safe? And then we can think about the confusion that this causes. Because actually, when we're at home, in our bedrooms, our homes are our safe space. So we know that this child feels unsafe in their own home due to these noises that they can hear. Footsteps outside, other sounds that didn't belong. We've got a bit of repetition of this idea of noise and sound that's working our way through. Then as we go a little bit further down, we've got 2 questions. Why would her mother, why would her father? So another structural feature that we've got here is this use of questions, the repetition of questions. This child's in the bedroom. We know that they're 7 years and 8 months old. Why would their parents lock them in? So actually, we're now interested to find out the reason why. These parents should be protective. And that's the question that is now opened up for us as the reader. Have they been locked in to keep them safe? Wanting to keep this child safe? Is it a protection element? Or have they locked them in there for another reason? A reason that to us as the reader is currently unknown. Sparked our interest. But we don't know the reason why this child is in this bedroom. Another structural feature that you could look at, and an easy way of spotting it, of course, is the speech marks. The repetition of her brother's name. We've got direct speech that is being used. This child is now talking. There is sounds outside of her bedroom door. She's tried to get out. She's looked under the... So actually, year 11, she's not worried for herself. That's where her concern lies. Now that we could write about, or that we could focus on. And they're all year 11. I've not picked out any keywords. All of it has been focused on structure, character, setting, zooming in, repetition, speech. I'm not looking at verbs. I'm not looking at metaphors. I'm not trying to find any similes in there. Another misconception that we don't get marks for on question 3 is analysing language. Because remember, it's all about how the structure is being used. Side, you will see that we have got an I do activity. So another good, strong sample answer of how to write in the exam. And you will notice that the sentence starters that are over on the other side have been incorporated into this. Extract. Furnival cleverly uses an introduction of character as Jessica rapped her knuckles against her forehead, which suggests she is distressed about something. So we've got beginning of the extract. So remember, that's our tier 3 vocabulary. That's our terminology, beginning and extract. Remember, we're using that tier 3 terminology. We've got our right Furnival. Remember, we're referencing them by their surname. And then we've got more tier 3 terminology, introduction of character. So already just in that first sentence alone, we're picking up marks. 1 to 2 marks for a few sentences. And then what's going to improve it even further is the piece of evidence that we've got here. So we've got our first piece of evidence. Now remember, we are aiming to use more than one piece of evidence in this question. We're aiming to use 2 or 3, because then that shows the examiner that you've understood this is a full extract and not just one little section at the beginning. Explain. That beautiful word suggests, which is where you show off that you've understood this character that's been introduced. And it suggests that she's just something. And this is interesting to the reader as they wish to find out what it is which is causing Jessica to behave in such an odd way. Now we're talking about why it's of interest. Alone, just down to that about being an odd way, would already gain us 3 out of 8 marks. Just go into that section there. And it's got a reason why it's interesting. And it would have been very easy at that moment to say, this is interesting to the reader and it makes them want to read on. But you've got to give a reason why. It's making them want to read on because we want to find out, why is she hitting her knuckles on her head? Why is a 7-year-old child trying to do that to herself? And then this talked in lessons and in masteries in the past about how do we link our paragraphs together to improve this 3 out of 8 and start thinking about how we can get 5 out of 8. By linking ideas together. And we've got that Furnival reveals Jessica's thoughts as she states, "You're too old to be frightened." So now we've got this idea here that her thoughts, that's a structural feature. Another tier 3 terminology that we're showing off, that thoughts and feelings in an extract. And we've got our next piece of evidence. The reader, because it puts us directly into the character's perspective, therefore increasing tension as the reader wishes to learn what is causing Jessica to feel such a strong sense of fear. So we've got another idea of why this is interesting to the reader. So interest number 2. And the reason why we're in their perspective, it's increasing tension, more tier 3 terminology there. Every single extract from 2017 has some form of link together, because we know that she's distressed. Now we're talking about this sense of fear. So it's actually her fear. She's scared. That's what's causing her distress. So we've now linked our ideas together. So going down back to that section there, that would gain us 5 out of 8 marks. Now remember, to get a grade 5, you need to gain over just half marks, just slightly over on each question to secure that grade 5. I link in another idea. So Furnivall uses an introduction of setting, more tier 3 terminology, when suggesting that Jessica is in her bedroom after being locked in by her father. Now we've got evidence number 3 and evidence number 4. So we're bringing in more evidence from this extract. One word embedded as a piece of evidence. You can use one-word quotations. It is still a piece of evidence. It suggests that she's in a potentially dangerous situation at the hands of a person who the reader assumes would attempt to protect her. We've got our explain. We've got our reason that it's... We've got our third reason why this is interesting. And draw it to a conclusion that Furnivall successfully builds up a sense of mystery as we too question, why would her father lock her in? As a result, wanting to read on to discover if her father was trying to protect her from or cause her harm. We've got sense of mystery. Further, tier 3 vocabulary, the type of story that people write, mystery novels. And another piece of evidence. Response there, by adding that section, would gain 8 out of 8 because we've linked character through to zooming in, through to this idea of setting. So all of these ideas, again, and we know what the bullet points are going to be. We know that they're going to ask us about the beginning of the source. We know it's going to ask us about the focus change and what it zooms in on. And we know that it's going to ask us about any other structural features. And if we're at a loss, always go for tension. Find out where is the turning point in that extract. What part of the extract is it that's making you feel a little bit nervous for a character? Part of the extract's making you worry for the person that's in the story. And if you can do one of them, on to 3 out of 8. If we can do 2, it'll be 5 out of 8. If we can link 3 ideas together and talk about this tension, it'll be a full mark answer. When I mark this paper for AQA, this is always the question that when I get to it, students have left it blank. Or students have written one line and then given up and crossed it out. And it's been the same when we've marked your mock papers. This will never change. You can go away, you can revise, you can pop this on a flashcard. You could do it as a brain dump and write question 3 in the centre of your page and remind yourself beginning, middle, end, zooming in, character, setting. Ask people at home to test you. Use your friendship groups as we're walking to and from school or catching the bus. Ask them, what structural features is it that Miss is looking for it? And the more and more extracts that we look at in lesson or in revision or at intervention or in your own time when you're reading for pleasure, you will start and see that every single novel, every single short story includes these things. At the bottom, for you and your families to have a workout, a little bit of a we do. So either after this session or tomorrow or at the weekend, if you wanted to take a break from this and then sit down and have a go at it later, to do it straight after this session, then that's absolutely fine. But it's moving now to the centre of the extract and thinking about those noises, the noises that are outside of the room. And if year 11 you do have a go at this, or you want to write it on a piece of lined paper, or you want to type it on a Word document, and you'd like myself or Miss Bateman or Mr. Richardson or any other staff member at the Manor Academy to have a look at this for you and give you some feedback, we will happily do so. Please utilise us. That's what we are there for. The amount of work that you want marking, we will happily do. In your home, I have got some question 3s. There are question 3s embedded into your homework booklet for you to have a practice at this as well. We will be running further intervention sessions on this, even though our focus will change to question 4. And if you've got any questions before your upcoming mocks or after any of the lessons, please speak up. Users, it's what we're there for. Thank you very much for joining us. If parents have got any questions or any of your family members, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much for joining us.